Hopefully in the next module, we're going to be able to see the utility of the anti-technique rule, meaning if you look for a specific ability, you're going to limit what your options are. Remember, we said infinite range of motion equals infinite options. When we use the multifunctional aspect of our elbow, instead of just having one particular technique, one specific contact area, being able to use the entire elbow, we'll be able to see that every part of our appendage and every part of our body can be weaponized. You can use your mic. For instance, the elbow pit is a viable tool for applying impellant force. Even if I just hit his torso, that snap, if you remember, we did the same or something similar with arthrokinetics and in immovable object unstoppable force with weaponizing the back of the knee. If I have an overhook, you can weaponize upward, keep your teeth clenched, to pop his head before coming in to clinch or to submit. Popping. This can be something as simple as jerking as he pulls back, pop with him into the throat, pop the side of the head. If you have an inside hook, you can come right from here to pop straight up before continuing in. Might pop you pretty good. Say he comes in for a shot. Instead of just trying to cross face and rend his head away, if he comes in to shoot, pop your head, your elbow down and then grab. As long as you're giving him that stunning blow, you're initially going to give yourself the reactionary gap and him to continue. Now, this is useful for wherever you are to come in for your lifts, to come in for your body clenches. If you come into the gut wrench, pop your arm before you start to try and deform his carriage. Moving on to the inside of the elbow, from the elbow pit to the inside of the elbow. When you're taking this impellant force, it doesn't look like you can get a lot of rotational pop, but you can blast someone, especially if you're attached, and continue forward with the inside of the elbow pit. Think of this in context of what we just worked, where you pop up his chin and you blast forward and continue on. A couple other uses. Say you're throwing, turn this way. You throw your hook and he bobs. Come all the way underneath. Now, do it slow so I don't have to pop your head. Here. Right into the side of the head. As soon as you feel that you weren't in contact, since you don't have the intention to use a specific technique, as he moves, you're contacted with the inside of your elbow, and you can continue forward and continue to move and improvise. A couple counteractive and marginally retroactive tactics for the inside and the elbow pit. Let's start from a 2-on-1. You have a grasp. Instead of just holding on, use your elbow to pop to start your entrance, so that this will be continuous. You start moving him in one direction, which will lead him into a subsequent blow. If he throws a strike, take the inside of your elbow. This isn't like you're breaking the limb. That's super difficult to do. The body's so resilient and plastic. But if you pop it, look what happens. You get him to move onto the ball of his feet and start to round his shoulders, which, for shock engineering, starts him in the downward trend. The spiral starts going downward. He gets sucked into the ground. Outside of the elbow, say you have wrist control. Just because you don't have a specific technique, just because you have a specific technique that you could throw from here, he can't formulate a counter if it's instantaneous, meaning you've weaponized your architecture. You can have fast techniques, but you can't have instantaneous response. To just drop this over, I'll do it softly. Now you can continue forward so that you can keep on working. The outside of the elbow, can have a lot of force. It's like a juiced up, renovated shoulder check, but led with the torque of the elbow. The same thing can be true with the back side of the elbow. When you're coming towards the leg or wherever you happen to be on the arm, like right now he's trying to get elbow control. This is keeping me from moving, but it can't keep me from moving upward. Now, every part of your elbow now, the inside, your elbow pit, the inside of the frame, outside of the frame, the front part and the back part, everything can be used no matter what the relationship is to the clinch. One of the most neglected aspects of weaponizing is the forearm. It's present in most combat sports, especially like American football and rugby, but it's neglected in hand-to-hand fighting because people think with their fists, they're hand thinkers. They think with specific techniques instead of weaponizing. Wrestlers should be super adept at using their forearms as a weaponized tool, but they don't. Now, say you have a cross-side overhook. Right here, you have a screwing blast right into his brachial plexus to just come forward. If this doesn't drop him immediately, which it may not if you have a rather seasoned, if you have somebody that's rather seasoned, he could be juiced up on an endorphin rush, and just stress-induced analgesia will keep him from feeling the pain. But if you hit here, it's enough of a shock to the system that you can continue forward and continue to improvise your weaponized architecture. But think of the forearm not as a lazy elbow, but as a screw that just pops outward. Now, it could be with the inside of the elbow, where you're just taking this across and then dragging into a hook and blasting with the other side of the forearm. Just think of this as an additional tool when you're within medium to close range. You have the elbow pit, forearms, any side of your forearms, any aspect of your lower arm can be weaponized. It's really critical. But what I want you to start to look at when we move on to different relationships of the clinch, don't think merely in terms of attacking primary control. I want you to start to look at joints. When we start blasting joints, that's going to start the shock engineering. Once you start colliding on a joint, it's not for destruction, it's for inserting impellant force. If you want limb destruction, it's got to be towards the muscle tissue, and it doesn't work on everyone. Somebody that gets juiced up, and you try and hit here, I mean, even if you have a super, it doesn't work on everyone. You met someone in arthrokinetics it doesn't work on, but that was because he was wearing ultimate grappling shoes. But if you use this forearm, immediately follow up with subsequent blows so that you're not static and looking at specific techniques. In shockability, I've used the term fear reactivity. I want to bring this into fisticuffs so that we have a more comprehensive understanding of where fear reactivity sits within the entire performance spiral when it comes to hand-to-hand fighting. Fear reactivity tends to be a term that people only associate with fear. Emotional reactivity is probably a more appropriate term for the machismo types that don't think that they're afraid. I'm going to be using fear reactivity, but I want you to think in context of emotional arousal. There are three aspects to it. Let me use your mic. Sensitivity, contractibility, and irritability. Sensitivity is how much he can discern, how much he feels your grasp. This is the amount of information that you give him so that his spine can react to what you're doing to him. And when I say react, I'm talking about fixed action motor programs, either conditioned or innate. Like if I touch put my finger in his eye, both eyes will contract. That's an innate fixed action motor program. A conditioned motor program would be to cower in fear. The more he's in a downward performance spiral, the more often he'll do that. The more often he's lost fights, been in a longer losing streak, the longer he's going to stay in it unless there's some kind of crisis intervention with a coach. So you have sensitivity. Irritability is how quick he is to respond to what he feels. Like if I grab a hold of him and all of a sudden his forearm tenses right away, he's very irritable. Irritable tends to have a negative connotation because it's associated with just emotion. Irritability is your quickness to react to what you sense. Finally is contractibility, and that's the magnitude to which you act. So if sensitivity is how much you detect, irritability is how quickly you react, and contractibility, pull this back, is how much you react, the volume, your magnitude of your reaction. When we use fear reactivity, I want you to think in context of that. When I talk about a performance probe, let's just look at one aspect, a jab. I like probing jabs. There are thousands of jabs, but I like probing jabs not as an early detection system where you're out here and you're sparring with him. You throw this out to see what his reaction will be. The probe is a preface to elicit his fear reactivity. So you throw this, and whatever his reaction is, that's the preface for continuing inside. You get his fear reactivity rolling, and then you start pushing him into the vortex and coming down, cascading over top of him with blows. When I say fear reactivity, what I want you to think of is the context of sensitivity, irritability, and contractibility. This is psychophysiological, and I'm going to be using that word quite a bit throughout the series. It's not just physical. There are negative thoughts that are attached to it and strong emotional arousal that's attached to fear reactivity. Now, when we go further, I'm going to be referencing later a concept called density. When I say density, that's the byproduct of fear reactivity. However his body starts to react, there are three things that, predominantly three things that we're going to be referencing later: heart rate, breathing rate, and muscular tension. Those three things are the initial internal distractions that happen as a result of a perceived threat, a mistake, something unexpected, or something that's random and not within the context of what you anticipated. When we talk about overhooks, I don't want you to think of a specific technique. I want you to think of the ability to ride wherever density is located. And we're going to be talking about this extensively, not just with your hand, but even if your fist is closed, the density in his muscle makes his body move. If he's loose, he can respond rather quickly. But if you cause an emotional arousal in him, or if he's aggressive, just aggression by nature is going to make his arm stiffer. That muscular tension, that intention, is going to be what we're going to manipulate. Now, this can be at the elbow, open hand or closed hand. I'm sorry, at the wrist, open hand or closed hand. At the elbow, so that you remember this from immovable object. Come this way. Immovable object, unstoppable force. How you can use this to begin shock engineering. The vector of his arm is where you have a heavy weight. You load him downwards as you change your level. Instead of thinking grab and clinch, think in context of shock engineering. Same thing is true with the neck. Usually they're very stiff at the neck and will pull back wherever you place in this brace. That works to your advantage because it'll move his entire frame. As you circle, that's going to give you the impellant force. As he's moving, he's going to start moving into you. When we talk about overhooks, I want you to think of moving density, not specific technique.